I've been home for 2.5 years, so my first day is a little blurry, but honestly, I remember very well the flight over to my mission. So we had to stop over in Texas because my mission is just underneath Texas. It's in Chihuahua. So we went from Salt Lake to the Texas airport, and then I think it was Houston. I don't recall which airport that is, honestly. I don't know Texas very well. But we went from Texas then to Chihuahua, and there's an airport in the city of Chihuahua, the capital city of the state. So we landed, and we had to fill out a bunch of forms, and they were all in Spanish. So none of us obviously spoke it well enough to understand what these forms said, but they were like customs and things like that, customs forms. So my MTC companion and I were just kind of struggling through them. She actually somehow figured out a lot of what we were supposed to put and where we were supposed to put it. I think you were supposed to write down like your passport information, passport number, things like that, birthday, personal information, reason for entering the country sort of thing. So my companion actually figured out a lot of it, and I don't know how, but we ended up filling out all the forms that we needed before they would actually let us pass through to the main airport and see President, who was waiting there for us with his wife and a few other missionaries. So we get out to the main part of the airport, and we're wheeling our suitcases because in between the customs and the main airport, we get our luggage. And we get out to President and his wife, and I mean, of course, everybody's speaking Spanish at this point, so like a lot of it was confusing for us. But it was kind of comforting to just see like our mission president and his wife just gave us all our sisters a really big hug, and President gave all the elders a really big hug. And then we took a group photo together, and I'll never forget like them giving us instructions on the photo, and I was just standing there super confused, like, I think this is universal. I'm pretty sure I'm just supposed to smile, like, don't know what you're all saying, but I'm going to go for that. So it was very interesting just the first few moments there, kind of realizing I am not in Kansas anymore, or not in the United States anymore, right? It was definitely a great first day. Our president kind of eased us into everything. He was a kind of a crazy driver, so he drove us to a restaurant for us to eat lunch there because we hadn't eaten in a long time. We had a lot of layovers and things like that. So they kind of just treat you to some food, at least in my experience. We got to go to some food, and then we went to the mission home, and we got to know President's family, actually. So he had a younger daughter, and then he had a son who's preparing to serve a mission, and he had a daughter who's about to leave for her mission. So we got to meet them, and they actually spoke very good English, which is interesting to me that their youngest actually had perfect English. So I'm not sure if it's because they sent them to school up in El Paso, Texas for a while, or if that's just like what they as a family decided to do, to be bilingual, to help out like with the missionaries. But our president spoke fairly good English, but his children definitely spoke like the best, and it was really comforting to have them kind of explaining everything that was going on to us, because there were missionaries that also arrived from other parts of Mexico or other parts of Latin America, as well as us American missionaries that all arrived at the same time. So both languages were going on, and a lot of us were just like kind of not sure what to do and how to communicate with each other. The first week was honestly actually really exciting for me. I was like on this very like spiritual high. Like my companion and I got along really well. She was very sweet. She was from Paraguay, and her Spanish was very different than Mexican Spanish. There's definitely an accent difference, but also like a linguistic difference, like in vocabulary difference. It was very interesting kind of hearing how she spoke at home and then hearing how everybody else spoke outside of the house. The first week I especially was just lost, honestly, in the language because I was trying so hard to understand what people were saying. But we had some really good experiences where I learned that it's not as important if you understand every single word, but it's more important how you show the people that this is important for them, this gospel that you're teaching them. So you share, I shared my first week pretty much just what I could. I shared my testimony that they taught us how to do in the MTC. You know, I play musical instruments, so we actually met a man playing a guitar on a street corner, and my companion tells him, my companion plays guitar, and I looked at her, and the guy just offered me his guitar, and I played a hymn because that's the only thing I could think of to play, and it was a really great moment. We ended up teaching him for quite a while. Came to church a few times and everything, but I'd say the first week is definitely the hardest, but also the most fun because you're just kind of getting to learn the ropes, and you're learning about the people and the food and everything in the language. So it's, it's very difficult, but it's definitely worth figuring out what you can do and then doing that to the best of your ability. So I served my entire mission in the capital city of Chihuahua, Mexico. I was never transferred out of the main city, which is kind of unusual, honestly. A lot of people get transferred out to different places. There's Cuauhtemoc and Delicias, Parral. There's a lot of different places that you can get transferred to, but I definitely stayed in the capital city, Chihuahua. It was honestly I feel like it was very different from the other areas of the mission. The main city had its challenges for being a city. So it's different from the rural communities in that area of Mexico, in that the people in the city are a little bit faster paced, not necessarily extremely fast paced compared to the United States, because I think everybody where I served was a little bit more laid back compared to how we are here in the US. But it was definitely, there was a lot of issues with transportation, so we had to make sure that we were always planning out times for bus routes, or if we needed to take a taxi somewhere, or if the weather was going to be crazy that day. So the weather in Chihuahua is honestly kind of insane. So the climate is actually high desert, so it's arid and it's very dry, but at the same time there's kind of monsoon season, and there's also dust storm seasons. So the summers would get just extremely hot. The summers are just over 100 degrees a lot of the time. Of course, they measure it in Celsius, which I honestly can't remember the measurements in Celsius, and we honestly half the time didn't know because we didn't have the technology. So we didn't even have a thermometer, and our phones were the little Nokia brick phones. So if a member didn't tell us what the weather was like that day, we would not know what it was going to be like. But it was I feel like the Lord helped us out with the weather. I feel like despite it being such extremes, he definitely would prompt us bring an umbrella today, or make sure you wear plenty of sunscreen today. So it was interesting that in the summer we were allowed to bring umbrellas, because it would get so hot and so dry and the sun would beat down on you so straight on that our mission president told us that we should start bringing umbrellas for shade, which was very helpful. He also allowed hats, but you had to approve them, so that's something that you should probably know. There were times in the winter as well that were so just cold that it was almost impossible to get yourself going in the morning. So it was very important for us as missionaries to be prepared with leggings and tights and just all the layers, and tall boots, even winter boots, so that it doesn't snow or anything usually. Every few years maybe it snows in the main city, but it gets very low temperatures and very dry low temperatures, which really cuts you to the core while you're walking out there. And then there are certain times when it will just start raining, just huge drops of rain. So pretty much an umbrella all year round is kind of necessary. So the only temple in the state of Chihuahua is not actually within the Chihuahua, Mexico mission boundaries. It's actually in the Juarez, Chihuahua, Mexico mission, which is the upper half of the state. So we actually, as missionaries, were not allowed to attend the temple because it was outside of mission boundaries, but members would make the trip. There's a temple, I think, in Casas Grandes, and the members would make, it's about a 5-hour to 6-hour drive, and the members would make day trips out of it, once a month. And as a ward or as a stake, there would be temple days. So for our investigators that were, newly baptized, it was important for us to mention the temple, just so they can start going and get into that habit and start with baptisms and things like that. So we would actually tell them about the ward and stake temple trips that were planned, and we've had a lot of investigators actually be really interested in that. And we had a few of them actually go, obviously without us, but up to the temple with the church members, and it's a good way for them to form bonds with the church members as well, because Gordon B. Hinckley says, and it says in Preach My Gospel, a member needs to have a friend in the church, a calling, and to be nurtured by the good word. And so it's very important for them to start immediately going up to the temple, making those friendships, making those connections, and then forming that relationship with the church, but also with the church membership, because that's what keeps people active, which is the goal. So actually in a few of my areas, the church attendance wasn't super high. I don't know if it was a main city thing. I don't know if the attendance was better outside of the capital city, but there were a few areas where a lot of our work was focused on less active members of the church, which was actually quite the challenge. requires a lot of patience, a lot of charity, a lot of pure love, because if you don't have real pure love for that person, they can tell, and they can tell that you are just trying to get them to go to church, and that's not the reason. So it was very eye-opening to visit a lot of these less active members and just hear their stories, hear them out, hear what happened and why they no longer feel that, church is something that they need to focus on. And then to really tune into that spirit and personally focus your lessons on their needs and, open their eyes to that eternal perspective and the reasons for coming to church. And, I had a companion at the time in this ward that was full of a lot of less active or inactive members, and my companion was very service-oriented, which I really appreciated, because sometimes it's hard to show people or tell people with words how much you love them, but my companion was very good at just going to a sister's house, maybe a widowed sister who was inactive, and just sweeping her floor or cleaning her kitchen or helping her with her laundry or, anything that they needed done. And it was a very rewarding experience to serve different people and different families and really start loving them like they were your own. There was this less active family that, I don't know that they ever got back to church, but they knew that the missionaries loved them, and they loved going out to visit people with us. And, that's the first step, is making sure that people know that you love them, which in turn means that the Savior really does love them, because that's who we're representing. So the church activity, it depends on your area, but I feel that there is a lot of retention issue, at least in the areas that I served in. So it was really important to make connections with the less active members and try to connect them as well with more active members of the ward and get them started with their own relationship with God, rather than relying always on the missionaries. Living in Chihuahua, it's definitely a culture shock, a little bit of a culture shock. But it's not honestly super different from the United States. At least that's how I felt while I was there. It's close to Texas, so there's a lot of people that think that they are cowboys, and they will wear their boots and their cowboy hat, and they will call you ma'am and sir, but the rest of their language is in Spanish. Sometimes they know some phrases in English, some very cowboy phrases. We had a member of the bishopric of my first ward actually was like a cowboy basically, and he did rodeos and shows up in Texas, and he was always telling us howdy and talking to us about the rodeo and roping cows and everything like that. So it's definitely a very cowboyish feeling in a lot of the places in Chihuahua, just for the closeness, I think, to the Texas culture and the border right there, and the area as well, just the land and everything, the landscape. And that's how anciently, or maybe not anciently, but that's how it was kind of historically in northern Mexico. It was a very big, just because of the way that northern Mexico is set up, so the weather, the climate, the fact that it's high desert, and there's a lot of plains, but there's also that mountain range that goes through there. There's been a lot of cowboys, there's been a lot of ranches, so ranches are a very big thing in Chihuahua, especially in the northern part of the state that was outside of our mission. There's that whole, all of the Mormon colonies, and there's also colonies of German people that are called Mennonites. So a lot of people would think that us as sister missionaries, that we were Mennonites, especially if we look even slightly German. So there's that whole culture of cowboyism, Mennonites, the Mormon colonies. So there's a lot to do with church history and just even the weather and the state itself and how it's formed the people around it. Shopping in Mexico, in Chihuahua at least, is pretty normal experience. Our grocery shopping every week would just be walk to the grocery store, take the bus to the nearest grocery store, or there'd be supermarkets, al super, or there'd be little corner stores, which is not the most cost effective, so we would tend to go to the bigger grocery stores. There are American stores, there's Walmart and things like that, but sometimes they're not in your area, so we would just stick to the things that were kind of in our area boundaries. But it was, everything's kind of cheaper down there, so when I arrived on my mission, the peso, so that it was 12.50 pesos per every dollar. And then when I left my mission, I think it was up to 15 pesos per dollar. So your dollar got you more towards the end of my mission, if that makes sense. So I could buy more with, 15 pesos than I could with the other ones. A bus pass would be about 6 pesos a ride if you rode once in an hour, and then if you rode a second time that hour, it was half the price, and if you rode a third time that hour, your third ride was free, which was kind of nice because we used the bus a lot in the capital city. So we would take the bus to go shopping, We would take the bus to appointments, to meetings, to church events, anything that was too far for us to walk, which basically was if it took about 45 minutes or longer to walk, then we would take the bus to it. Chihuahua was a biking and walking mission when I first arrived, but when I was there for about 6 months, it changed, and it was an all-walking mission. So that's why bus transportation and taxi transportation is really important. There are some very famous things in Chihuahua. There's a lot of cathedrals. There is these huge street markets called tianguis, which is just a term for street market. There is a lot of native tribes to Mexico in different parts of the areas. Especially in our area, in the main city, there was a lot of raramuri, I believe they were called. They wore traditional, bright colorful dresses that took, I think, months for some of the women to sew, and they were incredibly intricate and they were gorgeous. They had ruffles, a whole ruffle layer on the top, and then just a ton of ruffles around the whole bottom of them. These big fluffy dresses that were very traditional for the native people in that area. There was a lot more of them, I think, up by the mountain ranges. So if anybody served up in the cities towards the mountain ranges, you would see a lot more of them. But there was still quite a bit of them in the capital city, which is very interesting. The social atmosphere around them is very different. The poverty among those people is very high. And so a lot of them are turned to begging and turned to street vending and, have a tough life. So it was very interesting to meet these women and children, and the women especially are very timid, and they aren't really supposed to talk a lot to outsiders. So their husbands would often be the people that would talk to us, and they were often very not interested in what we had to say. So that was a very interesting dynamic with the local population of native people from different tribes. Historically in Mexico, there's always been a lot of different tribes of people. So it was very interesting to see that dynamic and how they still function today in modern society in Chihuahua. Another thing to note is that Juarez is on the other half of the state, but it is still part of the state of Chihuahua. And yes, the crime rate has always been statistically a lot higher than most other places in the world. I think just a few years ago, Juarez was within the top 10 of most dangerous cities in the world, especially for women. So that was something of concern to my family when I got my call. I think luckily I didn't serve in that city. It was in a different mission, so I served in Chihuahua, but it's still a concern. And I think that the Lord takes care of his sister missionaries, and I think the president is very aware of where he sends sister missionaries. So, for example, places more towards the Sierras, the mountain range there, actually tend to be a little bit more dangerous. And, missionaries actually have a more strict curfew in those areas. I don't think they even send sisters there. So the president is very aware of, curfews. He's very aware of crime in your area. He's very aware of where he's sending sisters and elders. And even the border towns, he would only send usually elders there because there's a lot more crime along the border between the United States and Mexico than there is farther into the state. So that's another important thing to note, that your president will definitely be guided by the Spirit. He will definitely not send you anywhere that is not safe for you to go. And the Lord would not have opened the mission to American sisters or sisters in general if it were not safe for us. So that was kind of comforting to know. If you are following the mission rules, if you are being, the best missionary that you can be, if you're making sure that you're following the Spirit, it will definitely lead you where you need to be going and keep you safe. Yes, there is crime, but I actually never had any problems with it. The men down there like to call you beautiful, like to catcall a little bit, and it's just kind of a cultural thing. That's just Mexico and Latin America in general. They're very open with how they think and feel and what they feel like saying. So something that you have to get used to and just kind of learn to roll with. But, the people there are so open, so loving, and it's, I wouldn't have traded getting to know that type of people for anything, because they're definitely part of me, definitely my brothers and sisters. So it's, you will be safe if you are following the mission rules, doing what you're supposed to be doing, and your president knows what he's doing. So as a missionary, we didn't get to see a lot of touristy places, but in the center of the city, there is a downtown area where there's a lot of shops and a lot of cathedrals and just beautiful things to see. There's artwork and things like that. So those are some cool things to see in Chihuahua. We didn't have a ton of time for it, but you'll notice just everywhere there's a lot of like Catholic traditions as well. So these are Catholic cathedrals that are everywhere. There's masses going on a lot of the time, bells ringing. In the stores there's always some sort of like rosary beads or candles that you can buy, or pictures of the Virgin Mary, and just like things that the saints that they believe in, that they're very prominent everywhere. So that's something that you'll notice everywhere that you go. I think regardless of whether it's Mexico or not, I think in all of Latin America that's just prevalent in the stores and in, homes everywhere that you're going to be going. Things that I love about the culture in Chihuahua is just how like straightforward people are. Sometimes to the point of almost being rude, which is honestly very entertaining for me as a missionary, because we're very careful with the words that we choose. You speak very formally. There's a formal and informal Spanish, and you always use the formal when you speak to people in Chihuahua, or on your mission in general. Even children. So you'll talk to the children in this very formal voice that you would usually use for people that are that you very respect, or that are very respected in the community. And these children will look at you with these faces of like, why are you talking to me so formally? Why do you respect me so much? But it's just interesting to see the culture and how, people will tell you, don't talk to me like that. Talk to me like, informally. And you're just like, no, like this is what we do. We're missionaries. And then you get to explain to them, why you're there, what you're doing, and why you're doing it the way that you do it. And just as a culture, these people are very like curious. They're very open about things, and they are more than willing to hear you out. There's a lot of different religions in Mexico, in Chihuahua in particular, but the main religion is definitely Catholicism. And then there's a lot of Jehovah's Witnesses there as well that are also preaching, which is very interesting. A lot of times people confuse us with another religion, and so, it's very interesting to tell people, look, this is what we believe, this is, why we believe it, and people are very willing to open their homes to you, and I loved that. If we looked really hot in the middle of the summer in the desert, people would be like, hey, sisters, I've seen you around, do you need a glass of water? Or, hey, come into my home and we'll hear you out for a minute and just like rest. People are very loving, very giving, very understanding. And it was very nice to kind of be taken in by these people and basically become one of them, I guess. They started treating us like family. In certain neighborhoods, we had kind of a route that we would take a lot of the week because there's only one way to get out of our neighborhood. And, the people knew us so well. And we had crossed these streets so long that they just kind of knew who we were. They knew what we were about, and they accepted us as like family. So the Latin American culture, but specifically I feel like in Chihuahua and Mexico, it was very like, you're here, you're working hard, you're serving us, so, you're part of the family. And I definitely saw many instances where people just like opened their homes to us without reserve, opened their pantries to us and fed us food because maybe we looked like we were hungry, I don't know, but they were very, we tried to serve them, but they definitely served us back. So that's something I really love about the culture there, is that the people are so loving and so service-oriented. I arrived at my mission on January 6th, which is actually the day of the kings. It's Dia de los Reyes. And that just basically means the kings that came to see Jesus after he was born, like in the Bible story. And they celebrate that day. They believe it was on January 6th. That's just when they celebrate it as a nation. And I happened to arrive on my mission that day. And I was very stunned that there's like this whole tradition behind it, and I had no idea what was going on until about a year later, and I was like, oh, that's what we did. But it's very cool. They have this bread that's called pan de rosca, and they have little it's like a little plastic baby that kind of represents like the baby Jesus, and they'll just bake it into the bread, or they'll put it into the bread after it's baked. And the tradition is that everybody will just kind of get a piece of cake and celebrate like when the kings finally made it to Jesus and got to give him their gifts and everything. And then as you're eating their cake and we're, talking about the holiday, whoever gets the piece that has the baby in it has to buy or make everybody tamales. So I got the baby my first day in my mission. I had no idea what it meant, and, nobody ever made me pay up with tamales, but could have had to have made a lot of people tamales, which is a very labor-intensive process, trust me. But it's just a very interesting tradition that they have. They celebrate a lot of different holidays there. There's Day of the Child, there's, of course, Mother's and Father's Day, but there's also Grandpa and Grandma's Day. Day of the Child is huge. There's like parades down like the main street in the capital city, and they actually have like a huge amphitheater there, and they like rent out the entire amphitheater for like Disney characters to come, or like superhero characters to come, or just like this huge festival. So there's like piñatas everywhere, there's just children dressed up in costume everywhere. It's almost kind of Halloweenish, but like maybe mixed with like New Year's and Christmas and just all these holidays just put together, and like it's just this huge celebration of children. And it's fascinating that you can hear this music playing from the amphitheater throughout the whole city the whole day. And in the schools, they celebrate it as well, just like here in schools in the United States, we'll celebrate holidays with children in classroom settings. They also do that in Mexico, and the little kids will get, presents from their family members and from their friends in their classes, kind of like we do like Valentine's, and we hand those out on Valentine's Day. The little kids will celebrate Day of the Child this way, and they'll get little presents, and they'll go home, and their parents will celebrate them. They'll have cake or whatever. They'll go to like parties. They'll go to the main party if they're, if they want to celebrate with the whole city like that. So it's a really cool day that they celebrate. I was always very impressed by that because I feel like children are really important. So I thought it was very interesting that they honor people in different ways on different holidays throughout the year, as well as celebrating a lot of different very Catholic traditions throughout the year as well. There's Lent, and there's, lots of different traditions. There's, during Easter, there's this whole procession in Mexico City where, they hire somebody to portray the Savior, and a little bit gruesome, they have him like kind of act out the whole scene of the crucifixion and everything. And the Catholics in their tradition tend to focus on the crucifixion a lot, and just the hardships that the Savior went through, which is a good thing to remember. I think sometimes we can learn a lot from other faiths about just remembering that Christ did suffer for us and what he did for us. But it's good to remember and teach as a missionary as well that like he rose and he is risen and he lives. And it's not just about the fact that they killed him or that he let himself, suffer for us, but it's also what that suffering brings us. And it's, the promises that we have if we're faithful to his sacrifice for us. So it's definitely, even with all the Catholic traditions, there is always a way to add on to them, to have a teaching moment, to make sure that people understand that your purpose as a missionary is to add on to their faith and not change it, because they already believe so much that we do. And there's just, some traditions that are a little different or a little off that we don't, believe in practicing. So definitely that's like a huge part of their culture, is all their festivities, all their celebrations. There's Day of the Dead in November, which is a huge thing as well. The funny thing about that is that Day of the Dead is 2 days of the year. So the first day is November 1st and the second day is November 2nd. And what happens is the Day of the Dead on November 1st is celebrated mostly for children who've passed away, and they set out altars of their favorite foods. Usually there's bread of the dead, which is pan de muerto, and usually there's like marigolds, and there's like bright colors, and there's a lot of symbolism involved in the altars that they either put up in their home or on the street or in the cemeteries themselves. And people will visit either the cemetery or will visit this altar, and they will, leave the favorite food of the person that passed away in hopes that they can then on this day of the year, their spirit can come back and like kind of connect with them. And we do believe, in the spirit world in the church. So it's a very interesting connection that these people feel with their passed on loved ones, that we as church members as well feel. So again, more teaching opportunities. And then the second day of the Dead is for the rest of people, so not just for children, which, it's fascinating to me that there's always these special days for children. So the second day of the Dead is for the rest of adults, anybody else that they think might be able to come back and kind of visit them. What is interesting about that as well, though, is that I don't know if it's because of proximity to the United States, but in Chihuahua, they also celebrate Halloween, just like we do. Well, not just like we do, right? They dress up and they trick or treat, but instead of saying trick or treat at people's doors, and it's still on October 31st, but they will chant outside of people's houses on the sidewalk basically, and they'll chant "Queremos Halloween," which means we want Halloween. And it's hilarious, honestly, and I love it, and it's adorable. And lots of the little kids in the wards and in the areas, and just kids all over will do it. So they basically celebrate a version of our Halloween, and then they celebrate Day of the Dead. So that's definitely an instance where you can see that there's like a culture lapse, like in Chihuahua, because of its proximity to the U.S. And I'm sure it's similar on the other side of the border. I don't know much about Texas again, but you know, there's a lot of culture sharing, which is really cool. The history of the people in Chihuahua, like I was talking about earlier, it's very diverse. So there's, you know, a group of Germans that had come over at some point in history, I believe during either World War II or before, and they formed colonies. And then there's the Mormon colonies that happened, you know, back before Mexico and the United States had their war. So back before it was really like American territory per se. And a lot of it was to avoid persecution. So a lot of the church members came down to the colonies in Chihuahua to avoid persecution from the United States government. In general, the history of Mexico is the people of Mexico are very proud of their heritage. The fact that the Spaniards came over, first of all with Christopher Columbus, but later on with Hernando Cortez, was very important for a lot of people. A lot of people in Mexico still will relate their genealogy back to how it connects to Spain, which is fascinating, because when Cortez arrived and met the local people, the Taínos, the tribe that was here, and a lot of the other tribes, you know, Aztecs, Mayans that were still around, but kind of in declination in their own societies, there's a lot of mixing going on between Spanish blood and, you know, local native Mexican blood, but it wasn't considered yet Mexican. And that's kind of how the first Mexican people, I guess, came about. And it was a very interesting thing that people have as kind of a point in their family of how they can connect their genealogy back to like Spain and things like that. So that's, it's a very diverse culture down there, which is very interesting. Some cultural do's and don'ts, I would definitely say, well, as missionaries, we as female missionaries, as sister missionaries, are not allowed to hug the males, in Mexico, but hugging is a big thing culturally. I was just stunned at how many people just hug each other, and that's just their common greeting. So in Mexico, when you greet somebody, what you do is if you're shaking their hand first, you'll shake their hand, and they'll pull you in, and the sister will give you a kiss on the right cheek, and you'll kiss her right cheek. So they'll just pull you in, you'll lean to the left, and you'll kind of just air kiss next to their cheek. I did not know that was a thing, obviously, until I got there. So, people would be pulling me in left and right and just be like, oh, you're new, and, they pull you in, or they just put their arms around, they give you a hug and a kiss on the cheek again, and, there's lots of different ways to go about it, but you kind of get into your rhythm of, as a missionary, hold your arm out straight for the men and don't let them pull you in, and then for the sisters or for the women that you might greet, because it's just a general thing, everybody does it, doesn't matter if you're a church member, whoever you are. You can either shake somebody's hand and pull them in, or you can just give them a hug and a quick kiss on the cheek sort of thing. So everybody's very very open, very loving there. And so that's very reflected in their custom and their greeting. Just something that you have to get used to, because it's very Latin American, very Mexican, to greet people personally like that. Which honestly I really started to enjoy. It connected us very much with the people that we served, being able to greet them that way. Definitely don't be too awkward about it. Just try to roll with it and learn how to do it well, and because I think sometimes people get offended a little bit if, you stiff arm them, especially if they're sisters and they know that you are allowed to hug them and stuff like that. We did have to learn how to explain to, any men that we might have met why we weren't allowed to, have that contact with them, and kind of our purpose as missionaries and the boundaries that we were supposed to have as missionaries, and, most people understood. So it was an interesting, concept to Latin Americans if you weren't allowed to do, their customary greetings. Common dishes in Mexico, and specifically in Chihuahua. My first few weeks, I didn't recognize any of the food. Mexican food here is nothing like Mexican food in actual Mexico, but I definitely grew to love it. My first couple weeks, I think that a lot of it was just beans and rice. And in Chihuahua, they're really into giving you a meat, as a main dish. So they'll give you beans and rice on the side, and then you'll have like some kind of either stewed meat, so it's been slow cooked and it's got a little bit of a broth on it, or it's just like grilled meat, or like, you know, maybe some grilled chicken, grilled pork, you know, something like that. They also are, you know, obviously burritos and tacos are a thing still, but they're different. So it's definitely like corn tortillas that have meat in them for the tacos. And there might be rice in it, or there might not even be meat or rice. Sometimes we actually had potato tacos a few times, or potato burritos a few times. People kind of throw together what they can with what they have oftentimes, because there is kind of a high poverty rate in a lot of the areas that I served in. So it was beans and rice are the cheapest thing that you can get. So that's a lot of what you eat, which it just is also very like filling staple food. I think my favorite dish in Chihuahua was called Chile Colorado, which just means red chili, or like colored chili, but more specifically red chili. And it comes specifically from like this red chili that they get. I don't know exactly which chili it was. There's probably a few different spices that they use in it. And what I mean by chili is not like the American term of chili, like a pot of beans and things like that, like chili dogs and stuff like that. It's not the same at all. The chili is actually like a chile, like a spicy pepper. So they'll have like this really hot red pepper, which was like utterly delicious, honestly. Like it wasn't just spicy to like burn, but it was like, it had a lot of flavor, and there was like a lot of deep flavor in the things that they cooked down there. And this particular dish was just like slow cooked either pork or beef with like this deep red chili and other spices, and like garlic, onion, things like that. And they'll pour it over this really good like Mexican rice that they make with just like chicken broth and like different spices. So it was like so good. And a lot of the times what you do is you don't even really use utensils very often. So sometimes they'll put just like a basket of tortillas on the table, and you'll use the tortilla to eat with it. So people will often either use a fork with their right hand and a rolled up tortilla in the left, and they'll push food onto their fork with their tortilla and then bite the tortilla. Or they will just rip up pieces of tortilla and use those pieces to pick up food and pop the whole thing in their mouth. So it's a very interesting way of eating, and I really got used to it. And when I came home, it was hard to transition from like always having something in one hand, or, you know, eating with my hands constantly, or eating with a tortilla or something to help me. But that's definitely like one of my favorite foods there. I mean, the tacos of all different flavors are just amazing. There's carne asada tacos, there's tacos al pastor, which is just like a different kind of meat, and it's always served with like pineapple and cilantro and stuff like that, and onion and stuff. So, I mean, the flavors are incredible. A lot of spice. Had a lot of people cook for us, because as missionaries you eat with members and you eat at different houses all the time. Had a lot of people cook for us with some pretty heavy spices, and it was very spicy, and we had to just drink, you know, liters of water to wash it down and make sure that we weren't like physically like crying. But it was worth it. It was very good. Like, all the food there was delicious. Sometimes they'll send you with a fruit for the road too, like a guava that you could just eat right there, or like a papaya or a banana, you know. So that was very sweet. And we were told on our mission once that if somebody offers you food after you've taught them a lesson, it's because they felt the spirit. So maybe that's a culture thing in Mexico or Latin America, I'm not sure, but, you know, they're very giving, and if, you know, they want to feed you, you should probably take it, because you don't want to offend people, especially the sisters in the church that cook for you. A lot of times they spend all day in the kitchen in the morning until the afternoon that you get there, and, you know, we get there at about 2 p.m., so that's when the food is every day. That's kind of their big meal. That's almost basically dinner for them. They'll have a little bit of like a supper later, but, you know, the main food is at about 2 or 3 p.m. So yeah, it's, you know, kind of a cultural faux pas to not, you know, accept the food, but to also not like compliment the food, and to, you know, make sure that you're, you know, letting the person that cooked for you know that you appreciate it. Food is a big part of the culture. It's a big connector for the people down there. So when you go to a dinner, when you eat with people, you know, they expect, you know, a certain level of manners, a certain level of, you know, communication, connection, and that's just how they connect with one another. So there's a lot of soda consumption, and Coke is like a big thing down there. There's also like pineapple soda flavored with tamarind, which is like a very interesting, like kind of bitter but also like sour root, and it's delicious, honestly. It's really good. There's also a lot of like apple soda, which, wasn't my favorite, but it's there all the time, everywhere. After a while, our mission president, and I don't know if it's still that way in the mission, basically made soda prohibited. So we were not allowed to drink soda anymore because it was kind of getting a little out of hand because, members drink it with every meal almost. And, the missionaries started drinking it at home as well. And, it's really dehydrating to just drink soda for every meal throughout the day as well. So since we're serving in a high desert, our president oftentimes would have us just drink water or have the members only provide us with water or provide us with like different juices, which they also call water, but it's still juice. Like lemonade, they would still call like lemon water or like pineapple water if it was pineapple juice. So that's just a thing of northern Mexico. I think they call all of their juices like a water of a certain flavor. So we had a lot of juices, a lot of waters after that. We weren't allowed to drink soda anymore, which was, I think, the best decision, the best call, speaking for dehydration and speaking for, what we're doing all day outside. There's very interesting foods like menudo, which is like intestines, like cow intestines, and there's also like cow stomach, and there's also like tongue and things like that. Tongue isn't bad. You can't really even taste it. It just tastes like another kind of meat. It's actually very good. They'll probably usually put it in tacos, and I don't think anybody even told us until after we ate it, so we didn't know anyway. I never actually tried menudo, but that's a very big thing in Chihuahua. And, it's either hit or miss. I think you either love it or you hate it. So, never got to try it. I'm not super concerned with trying it ever in my life because I've heard some interesting things about it, but definitely one of the crazier things that they eat down there. We went to the corner store probably too often. There's a lot of like sweetbreads, like pan dulce, and there's a lot of like bakeries in different places. So there's like corner bakeries or corner stores that are basically like mini 7-Elevens, and you can get like chips, like even just like American chips too, or like you can get these really good like sweet snacks, or you can get like spicy snacks. They have like spicy nuts and stuff like that, like spicy chips of like all flavors. There's tons of snacks down there. Our president actually had to limit our snack consumption as well, just to keep us on the healthy side as a mission, because it's very tempting to kind of go overboard with the snacks all day. My favorite actually was probably just buying like this roll of cookies that's called chokis. So they're just chocolate chip cookies. They're like Chips Ahoy, but like better somehow. And we would like dip them in Nutella and things like that. So definitely have a sweet tooth. Definitely there's plenty of like spicy, salty, sweet, just any kind of like snacks that you could want. I mean, the sweetbreads are out of this world. They're incredible. So you got to be careful with the bakeries down there because there's a bakery like everywhere and they sell amazing things. Studying the language. Language is actually a big thing for me. I'm actually now a Spanish major, and I grew to love the language because of how I studied it on my mission. Some people go for just listening and learning the language through listening to other people. What I did was I did a combination of things. So there is a time set apart for language study during your companionship study and your personal study in the morning. I've heard that the schedule has changed, and I've heard that it's a little different from when I served, but I'm sure the general idea is still the same, where you have a time set apart for companionship study, you have a time set apart for your personal study, and there's also some time set apart for language study when you're in another country or when you're serving in another language. The most important thing about language study is just to take it seriously. It will help you worlds, and you will be able to express yourself how you would like to faster when you take it seriously. Ask Heavenly Father for help when you're learning your language. It's very important to ask for the gift of tongues because He will give it. That's just a promise. That is something that I found out very quickly on my mission, that I should have taken it more seriously, but I started to take it very seriously after a while, and you have to be humble about it. It's frustrating not knowing everything, and your pride gets in the way sometimes, but if you are very humble about things and you ask, I kept a list in my missionary planner of words I didn't know that I heard throughout the day, and I would either try to look them up or I would ask my companion or remember what they meant, and it was so helpful to just rely on other people's help and to make sure I was continuing to ask questions. Asking your companion, asking your members, asking anybody locally, just people love it when you ask them questions, honestly. They're so sweet. And if you just go up to somebody and be like, hey, I think this is the right word for this, or hey, how do you say this, or hey, I'm a missionary, but I'm new here, I need to learn this word, or I need to learn how to do this, they'll help you. They're super nice about it. And you learn how to communicate really well with people through that as well. There are some very common phrases in missionary terms, but I would urge you to also learn common terms for just that region, for the country. I mean, even slang. You know, as a missionary, you're supposed to talk formally, so I wouldn't encourage you to use the slang, but learn it, because you're going to need to understand what people are saying to you, and oftentimes it is slang when people are speaking to you. I had a companion who spoke fluently English and Spanish, which was just amazing because she taught me a lot of what I needed to know to just understand other people and communicate better with them, and listen better. And after she opened my eyes to kind of like slang and informal speech, I understood like 100% better what people were trying to express to me, because people so often let these things slip into their vocabulary, and it's not the formal missionary speech that you learn as a missionary in the MTC and afterwards. So definitely, focus on learning the basics of the language, basic, conversations, basic conjugations and things, but also focus on, things that aren't necessarily formal. Pronunciation is important. You could have terrible grammar and terrible vocabulary, but if you pronounce things perfectly, people will respect your Spanish. And honestly, they'll actually listen to you more as a missionary. People sometimes get distracted by your Spanish if your pronunciation is off, but they can overlook grammatical errors and vocabulary errors, and they'll even help you with those if you're really making an effort. So I would definitely say to learn to pronounce things very well. Just listen. That's my advice. Listen to people as they're speaking. That's what I did. I just listened for a very long time. First few months I didn't talk a lot, but I listened so much and with like so much energy and effort that I really feel like the pronunciation came to me, and people started complimenting me before my Spanish was even, correct, before my, speech patterns were even correct or anything like that. Sometimes people would say things like "que rollo," which is like "what's up," or "que onda," which is also "what's up." They're not super formal, so we didn't say them a lot as missionaries, but like "que onda" is a little more formal. LDS vocabulary that's common: barrio, that is ward; estaca is stake; obispo, bishop; presidente de estaca, mission or stake president; presidente de misión, mission president. Things like that. I mean, you'll be teaching people about like faith, repentance, baptism, things like that. So fe, arrepentimiento is repentance, bautismo, baptism, things like that. You'll learn those very quickly. It's all over Preach My Gospel. I would say study your scriptures in the mission language from the first day. If you need your English scriptures, buy them, that's fine, but eventually you're gonna not need them anymore, and it'll be great. We had some really hard times, but they were also good times. I think the hardest times for us were the best times. Your mission isn't just all baptizing and all, roses and sunshine and rainbows. There's a lot of difficult times. You could get physically ill, you could get injured, you can even get depressed, you can, have hard things happen to you, you can have people not want to listen, which, they're very Catholic and people will not listen sometimes, but I think it's important to keep your perspective, keep that vision, remember why you're there. You made this decision for a reason, and remember that, Heavenly Father's obviously on your side. Jesus Christ is obviously on your side. You're doing the right thing. I remember specifically there was a time towards the end of my mission I was getting very frustrated, and you're not always going to get along with every companion, unfortunately, which is another thing that you learn, how to deal with people, how to get along with people, and how to love them with Christ-like love, even if you don't get along with them all the way. My last companion and I sometimes had some problems, and I think we were both stressed out because we were both towards the end of our mission. She had 3 transfers left, I had 2. So we were both nearing the end. And I think we wanted desperately to work hard to prove ourselves to other people, to the Lord, to ourselves, and just really bring as many people as we could unto Christ. And there's one day that we were walking down the street, and I think I was kind of upset with my companion for some reason that isn't important anymore. We were very stubborn, and I think we probably butt heads. But we were walking down the street, and I don't think that the Spirit was fully there in our companionship, and that's, it just happens sometimes. And it was very interesting because despite our weaknesses and despite our little quarrels that didn't matter, and our differences, the Lord still saw fit to bless us and saw fit to bless the lives of other people through us, because they still needed the blessings, and we were still there. We were still doing our missionary work. So we were walking down the street and we saw this woman shoveling like pebbles or rocks or something, which is another thing, that everything is constantly in construction down in Mexico. I feel like people are constantly like adding onto their houses, or like fixing something, or like trying to save up money to finish like a part of their house that's still like half open to the world, and rooms that haven't been completely finished and things like that. So we saw this woman kind of doing something similar. She was shoveling some stones and things like that in her front yard, and my companion just stopped and was like, "Hey, can we help you?" Because that's the thing we do. I mean, you're going to feel weird at first, but you just offer to help everybody, and like people eventually start accepting you. And my companion said, "Hey, can we help you, shovel? Can we do something for you?" And I mean, we're in skirts, we're in dresses, we're missionaries. And she goes, no, you guys look so nice. Like, we don't need your help. We don't need anything. And my companion goes, "No, give me a shovel." And, I was like, whoa, what's going on? What is she thinking that I'm not thinking? And so it's really important to maintain your connection with the Spirit, because I feel like she was very in tune in that moment. And, the woman that we were helping, she was so impressed. And she was like, "Look, I've had so many people come over. I've had, so many different religions enter my home with their messages, but I really want you ladies to come back, and I want you to share what you have. I mean, why you're here, what you're doing, why you're helping me." So she said, "Come back in an hour. Come dar la vuelta," which is another very common phrase, which is, come turn the corner, come give us another, drop by later. So we came by, and she had united all of her children and her husband, her entire family, even including a grandchild of hers. They were all there. And they were ready to listen. And I don't think I'll ever forget getting to know them, and the opportunity that we had to teach them was incredible. Granted, people don't progress instantly, and it's always a struggle, because they're trying to reconcile their current ideas with the ideas I think that they've known since their pre-existence. And it was very special to get to watch her and her family, how much they loved each other. I learned a lot from them. I don't know how much they learned from me, but I learned a lot from them about love, about service, about communication, about humor even. I mean, she was hilarious. The mother of this family had such a good sense of humor, and she was so sweet and kind, and her daughter would bake us cookies and cakes and things, and her son would crack jokes with us, and it was like we were part of the family. They really opened their hearts and their homes to us. And the end of my mission, the last weekend of my mission, they ended up deciding to make a covenant with the Lord and get baptized. And it wasn't because of anything we did. We were just there. We were doing what we were supposed to be doing. And the important thing is that the Spirit of the Lord was so strong during their lessons, and they were so prepared. Who knows how long the Lord had been preparing these people, but because we were there and we were in the right place, the Lord used us as a way to help them learn of His truths. And it was just an incredible experience to remember that, the work is hard and we're rejected often. And sometimes you're not in tune with the Spirit, and sometimes you're not even getting along with your companion, but there's people that need this message. There's people that are ready for it. And if you humble yourself and you allow the Lord to work in your heart, He will help you help these people change their lives, and add to the faith that they already have. Probably my favorite people in the world still. They are just so loving and so kind. It was a very personal spiritual experience for me, of the truthfulness of the gospel and how it surpasses differences and barriers and language and cultural differences, just anything. The gospel really is a powerful force. Christmas is kind of crazy in Chihuahua. I only had one Christmas actually in the mission field, like in Chihuahua, because I was in the MTC for my first Christmas, which was actually kind of a cool experience as well. Christmas in the MTC is very cool. So was Thanksgiving. I was there for all the holidays. But Christmas in particular in Chihuahua, on Christmas Eve, there's like a big dinner. So like we planned out with a member family to go to their house for the Christmas Eve dinner, ate this huge meal and everything, hung out with like the whole family. It's pretty much just like family time. I don't know that it's as commercialized as the U.S., and it's kind of nice. They very much focus on the religious aspect of it as well, because it's such a religious country. So, I mean, members of the church or non-members of the church, it's a big deal, Christmas. And, it's such a great season for tradition, for the food. I mean, the Christmas dinner might be different for every household depending on the money they have or what food they have, but they still have the dinner, they still connect, they still get together, and it's usually on Christmas Eve, and then Christmas morning is kind of similar to the U.S., I believe, where, there's presents and gift giving and everything like that, but, it's definitely a time for family, for connection. So Christmas is definitely a really important time in the Latin American culture, and it's really great to see how much faith they have and learn from them about how we in our lives can more fully accept Jesus Christ and his birth and his life and his purpose into our own lives. When I first started buying clothes, I'm from California, so there is no Sister Missionary Mall or anything like that. I bought a lot of my clothes at Old Navy actually, and Kohl's, and I think Target as well. Old Navy and Kohl's are probably the best places, honestly, to find things. Even Ross sometimes had some really good deals for nice, kind of longer skirts and things like that. Old Navy had some really good skirts as well, I remember. It can get pricey, so you have to try to find the deals if you need that, but at the same time, it's an investment. I mean, you're going to be wearing them for 18 months. You're going to buy clothes out in the field as well, so you have to watch for that, but oftentimes there's not a lot of modest options, especially depending on the country you're serving in. But we always found something, so if we needed a new skirt or shirt or whatever to supplement our wardrobe, there was a time for that on P-Day, and we would go look for things, and, we found some good deals and some good things down there. Things are very much cheaper in Mexico, so there are some things that you can wait to buy when you're down there, but you shouldn't do that for a lot of things because that's kind of a risk. It's kind of a gamble. But for sure, make sure that you have a lot of clothes that are interchangeable, a lot of skirts and shirts. There's a very big windy season in Chihuahua, and don't have a lot of fluffy skirts during that season. Pencil skirts are the way to go for that season. I don't think that the pencil skirts can be super tight, so just make sure that they fit nicely and correctly, but aren't overtly tight or anything like that. Packing advice as well. Your suitcases, I think, have to be under a certain weight limit, so that's an issue as well. So make sure that you're getting things that you really need. And they'll send you a packing list with your call anyway, which was very helpful for me. I mean, bug spray is a must, and sunscreen is a must because there is a huge season of just mosquitoes, straight up. After it rains, it's still hot, so the rain will kind of evaporate and leave these puddles or these moist spots, and mosquitoes just run rampant in that stagnant water. And so, I mean, there were days when we came home covered in bites, all over. Just hundreds. I have pictures of them that are awful. So definitely sunscreen, bug spray, things like that. Cool and warm clothes. So you're going to need skirts that are lightweight and shirts that are also very lightweight. Obviously still modest, right, because you're a missionary, but, in the summer it gets just extremely hot. So make sure that you're finding things that are appropriate for the weather changes. Make sure you have enough layers for winter because it does get very cold in the winter as well. Umbrella's a must, Safety tips during the rainy season, specifically, there can get some pretty bad flooding in the streets. So make sure that you're never walking through any of the canals, systems, or anything like that in the city because people have been swept away in those. So that's not a good idea. Make sure that you never go anywhere without your companion. Obviously follow the mission rules. Don't drink straight out of the faucet, the water, unless you want a parasite. That's just the reality of things. The water system there is not the cleanest, which is why, at least when I went out, they gave us water bottles specifically that filtered our water before we drank it. So you can put water from the street in there and it will filter it for you and you'll be fine. Don't really recommend that. I mean, tap water is fine, putting it in that bottle. Your president will explain that to you. The packet that you get when you serve as well will explain that to you, but make sure that you're very aware of that. And if you do have to take a deparasiter, which they make us take, I think, every 6 to 8 months, and you take it as companions because you both have to do it at the same time, or one of them could infect the other person or something like that. So when you do take a deparasiter, it's very, very, very important to remember to also take some sort of probiotic when you're done with the deparasiting process. Because what the deparasiter does is it wipes out good and bad bacteria from your entire system. And what you're going to want to do is replace the good bacteria, or you will not be able to digest things later, and it's going to be painful and it's going to be terrible for you. I wasn't lactose intolerant before my mission, and now I am. And it's my doctor is LDS, and he was telling me, this happens a lot with foreign missionaries. They don't properly take care of themselves after either deparasiting or, taking antibiotics or whatever it is that wipes things clean in your system. And so you have to make sure that you keep a balance. Make sure that you're just trying to eat healthy, but make sure also that you are taking care of the balance of your system and taking the necessary precautions, before spicy food, maybe eating some like papaya or some kind of fruit that will like soothe your stomach, or, make sure that you're taking these probiotics. And you can get drinkable probiotics. You can also get probiotics in pill form, and they help worlds with the things that you're going to need for digestive health and everything like that. Your feet are also going to get a lot of blisters because it's an all-walking mission. Make sure you have comfortable shoes. Cute is out the window for shoes. Clark's has some cute but comfortable shoes. I don't know about many other brands. I used Clark's my entire mission, and they were a godsend. They were utterly wonderful shoes. They lasted for a very long time, and they were very sturdy, and they were very thick-soled, which is so helpful for your foot and leg and hip health, especially as a woman. Like your joints, just, you have to take care of your body. So the proper footwear is very important for health and safety as well. Definitely don't get flimsy shoes. It's not worth it. You'll also have a lot of rocks come into your shoes throughout the day. You'll get used to walking with rocks if you don't want to keep taking them out every 5 steps, but worth it. It's fine. For pre-missionaries, I would definitely say try to strengthen your own testimony before you get out in the field. I definitely personally prayed a lot about whether or not the Book of Mormon was true. Definitely got answers personally about its truthfulness, and even into the field, you're going to be constantly working on your testimony. And it's a thing after the mission too. You're still going to be working on your testimony and your own conversion, but really try to convert yourself to these truths because it's going to be so wonderful for you later in your life.